the big question is, what am I going to do with my time flow as a result of not seeing the patients the associate's going to be seeing? Because hiring an associate does not make you money. It doesn't. What you do with your time in lieu of seeing the patients the associate is seeing makes you money.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry look like to you? I'm Katie Polson, a dental hygienist and your host.
Hello, everyone. This is the Growth in Dentistry podcast, and we are super excited for our podcast today. We ask the question every week, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? And this is certainly an exciting week. Super excited for our guest. My name is Steve Jensen, a total data nerd and your host today. As a quick note, this podcast is brought to you by Dental Intelligence. They are awesome to support us week after week. And as a giveaway, they like to hook people up for checking out what they're doing. So if you'll take a demo of the software, they'll give you a $50 gift card for checking out what's newest and greatest with Dental Intelligence. And that link will be in the show notes. Now, without further ado, our guest today started a company called CFO Dental Partners back in 2016. And he is definitely a numbers nerd. So I'm excited about today because a lot of times, the last couple episodes have been heavy on leadership and conceptual and strategy stuff, which is great, but we're going to take a different take at strategy today. One of the things that I love, so numbers, Dental Intel, we're big about like, what are the lagging metrics, but what are really the leading metrics? What drives success? And here's what I love about Danny. And whenever I talk with him, he's so focused on not what happened in the past. CPAs, typically when you're talking numbers, you're looking at the bank statements and what happened and where did you spend your money and where did your money go? And you're less focused on trying to engineer the future. Like, what do I really want in my future? Where do I want this business to go? And making a plan to execute on that moving forward and looking into the future. So we're going to talk, how do I answer some of those like future questions and should I do this or should I do that type of questions today? And you might even want to slow down the speed. If you're a habit like I am with podcasts, if you listen to 2x or 1.5x, you might need to bring that back today to 1x so that you can catch everything that Danny has to share with us. So without further ado, Danny Richards, the founder from CFO Dental Partners, is joining us today. Thanks for joining us, Danny.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here. And you can go 1.5x at least.
You think so?
Don't go 1x. Yeah, it's so boring, man.
Feels so slow.
It does.
So,
you're like,
Danny,
how are you talking so slowly right now?
Danny, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you decide to start CFO Dental Partners? How did you get into dentistry? Why the focus with dentists?
Yeah. Okay. So once upon a time, I was in wealth management, financial planning. I did that for about 15 years and started CFO Dental Partners it was kind of to solve a problem. We'd sit down and do planning with business owners and kind of, if you want to retire at this age with this kind of lifestyle, you have to save X amount a month, to be able to do that, like traditional financial planning, right? Sit down with business owners and especially some of the dentists that I worked with. And it was like, well, what are you going to make this year? I don't know.
Whatever hits my bank account, I guess.
Right. Well, it was like, well, Cody, what's your budget? What's your pro forma or projection? And so, well, I don't have a budget. I fix teeth. I see patients. They're happy. They come in. I have more money at the end of the month than I had at the beginning of the month, and that's good, right? And then it was like, well, what do I? These future type questions, right? These futurist narrative type questions, like, should I do this? And I think I want to hire an associate. I think I want to expand out my opportunities or whatever. And I'd say, well, what effect is that going to have in your business? I don't know. I think it's going to be good. Right. Right. And sometimes that was literally the depth of that because of the lack of the tools that practice owners had to be able to diagnose it any further than that. And so it was like, well, let's solve that problem first. So I contracted bookkeepers, try to put the data in a format they understood, try and make it real time and accurate, because half the time they'd get the financials and they'd be a mess or they'd be wrong or they'd be old. And so I just wanted to be able to create a model or a way for that practice owner to be able to see that information and make good future-based decisions on it. And that was it. I didn't tell anybody. I just sort of started the company as an aside to compartmentalize that. But then I kept getting phone calls like, hey, I was talking to Dr. So-and-so and they were telling us what you're doing and I think we could really use that. And so we just kind of grew that way. And at first we were working with all kinds of industries. A lot of referrals and pretty much all small business owners have the same problem that they're trying to solve in a lot of ways. And so eventually we sort of niched into dental. It's always been fascinating to me, a lot of things about dental, and not to get too down that rabbit hole, but we started to focus on helping practice owners close the gap between where they thought their cash flow could be and where they thought it was now. And to be able to make some of those decisions and have peace of mind as they make them. Fast forward, 6-7 years. We're a team of 12. There's 12 of us now on the team, and work with practices all over, and we still only really grow when people remember us. Sorry, marketing team at DI, you probably didn't want to hear that, but we don't market. Anyway, it's been fun, and it's a good group. We're happy to provide what we do.
Well, I'll tell you, like, I'm just listening, even individuals, not even just like doctors, have this problem of, hey, I think my spend is here, but it's actually here. And there's like this big gap. My wife and I, like, I'm not like an intense, it's going to sound like I'm an intense financial person. I swear on my life, I'm not. But
are you a saver or are you a spender? Like, between the two of you?
I'm like, she's more the spender and I'm more of the saver for sure.
All right, nice.
But like every year we go through and we allocate every single thing that we spend for the whole year. And like, hey, how do we do against our budget? And then we create 3 different budgets every year. We do like if we're a super cheap budget, like if we were going to like save like crazy, and like a moderate budget, and then like an extravagant budget. If we just had a great year, like we're just going to spend so much money and enjoy ourselves. And it's fun to just like check on like where we're at. But like, to your point, we just had a moment this last week where all of a sudden I went to go pay some bills off, and I was like, holy smokes, like we just had an awesome April. And so cash spend was here when we thought it was going to be here. So like there's scope creep. And I know that happens in businesses, right? There's scope creep that happens, things that we miss. So I'm super excited to like dive into some of the best practices. Now, normally we ask the question, what does dentistry mean to you, at the end of the podcast? But as Danny and I were talking, I liked his answer and I thought it framed the conversation today really well. So Danny, you gave me a little tidbit of what your answer would be. So I'm excited to hear all of it. But let's start with that question. What does growth in dentistry mean to you from a CFO's perspective?
Okay. Yeah, I love it. So there's obviously a lot of ways to grow dental practice. For us, for me, growth in dentistry means having peace of mind in where you want to take the practice. By having peace of mind in your practice comes as a result of knowing and understanding your cash flow and your time flow. Those are the only 2 things that I can control. Or
cash flow, time flow.
Right. In my business and in my personal finances, right? The same thing. I can influence how I spend my money, and I can influence where I spend my time. And if I understand the correlation between those 2 and understand where my money goes and why it goes there, that's what I need to be able to get out of this historian narrative and into that futurist narrative to say, should I hire an associate? Should I expand into 10 ops from 6? Should I, do all these things? I can't answer those questions until I understand the relationship between my cash flow and my time flow. And really, if I want to grow my practice from 2 million collections to 5 million collections, that's going to be peace of mind for me to get it to that point. If I'm at 2 now, and I just want to be able to spend a little more time on the boat, or change the type of patient profile that we see, or have a lot more community impact, whatever that is for me as an owner, to understand where peace of mind comes from, and then to understand the relationship to that peace of mind of cash flow and time flow, to me, that is the best kind of growth in dentistry.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. So let's then hone in on cash flow, and then maybe talk about some of the time flow later on and implications, or you can get it throughout. But let's talk about cash flow. So what are maybe we start with some of the should I questions. So like doctors, I'm sure come to you all the time, and listeners, I'm sure you have a lot of these questions. Like, should I hire an associate? You started to go this way. Should I hire an associate? Should I buy this piece of equipment? And how do I understand its ROI? Or should I depreciate the asset? And there's obviously some tax implications. Maybe that's less what you're doing, but you can speak to that.
All those things. You just said all those things.
And then should I hire someone to do this, role in the front office if I hire an associate? And so a lot of these should I questions in the practice, how do you address those with clients and understand like if it's the right time or not the right time?
Yeah, totally. I love.
Or maybe what are some of the most common ones? Maybe we could start there too.
Yeah, when you just mentioned a bunch of those common ones. And what I want, Steve, at the end of this is I want anyone listening to be able to take this information and go do it. Not
Cool.
like, wow, that was a really cool talk, and I guess I have to hire Danny. I want them to be able to take this information and go do what they want with it. So let's talk about the cash flow piece and one of those should I type questions. I want to be able to show the listeners where to go to get the information to be able to analyze this question on their own.
Cool.
So let's think about equipment. If I've got a pano that I want to upgrade, or let's say I want to buy a cone beam. Cone beams are super popular right now, as practices are expanding their services, whether that be sleep or ortho or whatever it is. Adding a cone beam right now costs a decent amount of money, and unless I have a bunch of cash sitting on the side, I'm going to probably borrow money to get that piece of equipment. And let's say right now you have to spend $100,000 on a cone beam, and I have to decide how I go about buying that piece of equipment. And it's got to be a yes or no at some point. And for a lot of practice owners, it's a no until they get the information they need to diagnose and treat that problem. Right? Practice owners, clinician practice owners, have spent their entire lives figuring out how to get the tools necessary to diagnose and treat their practices or their patients, sorry. But nobody's given them the tools to be able to diagnose and treat their practice the same way. And so they're sort of stuck with this, well, I'm going to guess and I'm going to hope it's the right decision. Or I'm stuck in indecision mode and I'm just going to sweep it under the rug or just let time pass without making that decision. If I can figure out the data that I need to effectively diagnose and treat that problem, the problem, should I buy a cone beam, then it actually happens really quickly. It's just sort of like, okay, well, what are next steps? I now know what I need to do to treat this problem. Let's do it.
So then let's talk about that. Like, what are the tools? Let's keep the cone beam then. Like, that's what I'm interested in getting. What are the tools that I need to like really diagnose it? And then what am I looking for, so to speak, on this? I like the way you're framed, like this, like X-ray, right, of my financials. So
there is one of the key pieces that I want to talk about today is productive debt versus unproductive debt.
Okay.
There's all kinds of ways for us to get into debt. Some of which is productive, some of which is not, most of which is probably not. If a farmer buys a tractor to be able to produce more goods, that's productive debt. If I buy a $2,000 TV from Best Buy, that's unproductive debt because it's not generating anything new. It's not generating new revenues, new product, new services. Cone beam is productive debt because it's going to be used to either enhance the quality of the patient care or it's new billable services that I get to make. Let's put the profitability formula in the show notes too.
Yeah, we would for sure will.
Okay, so when you look at the profitability formula, that's a very basic flow chart, basic equation to say what levers can I pull on here to increase profits. And one of those levers to pull on is going to be on the front end, right? The production side, either number of visits or production per visit. Well, having a cone beam, is it going to affect one, if not both of those? It could. If I market that I have a cone beam, it can increase total number of visits. If I have new billable services that I can have as a result of that cone beam, then I increase my production per visit. So I want to understand if it's productive versus unproductive debt. Practices have both, a lot of both. There's a lot of equipment that my reps want to sell me that may not be productive debt, but they got to hit quotas. So don't blame them. They're there to do their job, right? But I have to analyze that as productive versus unproductive debt. So if I say it's $100,000 and I need to borrow money for that, let's say the payment for that piece of equipment, over a 5-year period of time is going to be $2,500 a month, right? With interest. So now I have to break down. I have new cash outflow of $2,500 to be able to pay for that cone beam. How do I generate new cash flow to offset that $2,500 of new cash outflow? So is it either production per visit? Is it total number of new patients? Is it time flow? Do I save time by having that new piece of equipment? If I decide to do in-house lab versus out, am I saving money on lab fees? Yeah. Am I spending more time Yeah.
Mhm.
So I need to be able to break down a little bit of both of those and see if it makes sense financially. Now, cone beam, let's say you do decide it's productive debt and you have analyzed the numbers to figure out you can make that work. You can make that cash flow, right? You then have a choice, what you mentioned, to depreciate that piece of equipment. So just real quick on depreciation. Depreciation is basically a fancy way of saying, how do I not pay taxes on this?
Mhm.
Okay. And a large piece of equipment like that has to be spaced out. I have to decide how I want to space out that deduction. If I buy a new handpiece or loops and it's $1,000, well, I just get to write that all off. With it being big, I have to space that out. Well, I have to choose. Vendors and reps are going to tell you, and sometimes accountants are going to say, well, you should just write all this off right now. It's a good idea, right? Because it makes your taxes go down a bunch right now. $100,000, I get to just cut off right at the top of my net income, and I reduced my taxes, my taxable income by $100,000. Well, that could be a good idea. I would say most of the time, in my opinion, and disclaimers is not tax advice. But most of the time, I would highly recommend that your cash outflow match the depreciation.
And what's the reason for that?
Because if I depreciate it all right now, $100,000, but I'm making payments on it for the next 5 years,
Mhm.
then I don't have anything to go along with the payment in terms of deduction in the future, because I took it all today. So it makes my accountant's report card look great this year because my taxes went down. But now I have payments that I'm making for the next 4 years on a piece of equipment I have no deduction for. So it makes those payments feel really heavy.
Mhm.
And that's when a lot of times the practice owners ask that question at the end of the year. They go, why does it feel like I'm paying taxes on money I don't have?
Mhm.
Well, that's one of the reasons why.
Mhm.
Because you took a bunch of depreciation in year one, and you
you're
have
still
payments
making
in years
payments, yeah.
2 through 5, but you have no deductions to go along with it. It feels heavy. So if I pay cash for a piece of equipment right now, yeah, write it all off right now, because I had all the cash leave my bank account. I want that deduction. But if I didn't, and I borrowed money against it, most of the time I would recommend having that mirror my outflow.
Now I wanted to now say, okay, well, how about an associate? Because I can't depreciate an associate.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the associate.
But yeah, let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. Do we have time? How much time do we have?
I was looking at time. We're good. Let's chat for a little bit.
Okay. So the should I question about the associate really comes down to, what is my opportunity cost in bringing that associate in the door? So we can look at a flow chart of understanding what that associate costs. It's really easy. You look at the provider's production, you divide that by the number of days that provider is chairside. You multiply that by the percentage of the collections that you're going to pay the associate. That's what it's going to cost you roughly to hire an associate. We'll put that in the show notes. I'll build the equation for you.
Yeah.
That's because you could Google that. You could ChatGPT that. The big question is, what am I going to do with my time flow as a result of not seeing the patients the associate's going to be seeing? Because hiring an associate does not make you money. It doesn't. What you do with your time in lieu of seeing the patients the associate is seeing makes you money. So again, time flow and cash flow, and how they relate to each other. The other thing I wanted to cover is on systems.
Yeah, talk to us about that.
So one of the things that we work really hard to provide our practices, the practice owners can do for themselves as well, is to create predictable systems. You have to have that drag. So when you think about it, instrumentation on an airplane, right? The financials the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet, the statement of cash flows, the analytics board on dental intel, the collections board, the data that you're getting out of the practice. That's all instrumentation in flying an airplane. When it comes to systems are a healthy drag on that plane to be able to create stability. That's what drag does on a plane. Because you have thrust, right? And you have lift. Anyway, I won't get into it, but
no, this is good. Keep going.
So the stability piece of drag comes in having systems that are predictable
Mm-hmm.
and understanding how to build those systems inside your practice helps take the emotion out of some of those financial decisions. And it helps the team. So when it comes to like team systems around personnel, around clinical processes, around making strategic decisions as the CEO, if you have predictable systems there, it can add stability.
Mm-hmm.
And we humans flee unpredictable environments.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not safe. We like safety
We
and
like safety,
comfort. Yeah.
right? It's a threat to our safety. We want that stability.
Mm-hmm.
We don't often know, as business owners, we don't often know how much instability we add to our own environment without creating those systems.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I can add predictability to understanding my cash flow, my time flow, to know where to go to get the data to answer some of those should I type questions, it's going to add stability for the practice owner.
So what are some of those like key systems that need to get implemented into a business for it to be more stable?
That might have to be a whole other podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few, honestly. But I guess one thing, I know that we're kind of running out of time, but actually the third part that I wrote down that I wanted to still mention was the burn rate, something we call the burn rate. And burn rate is what we refer to as how much money you burn through in a month.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the profit and loss statement, that's only part of the story. Because the bottom line on the profit and loss statement is your net income. That's the amount of money the government's going to tax you on. That doesn't always mean that's how much money you have. So what are the other elements? If I want to look at how much money does it take me to run my practice in a single day? Here's an equation for that. I need to know what my income is, right? For the burn rate. Sorry, let's go back to just overhead. What does it cost me? Daily overhead is a question we get often. Daily overhead is just a function of all of your expenses. You have to add to that information that's not on the profit and loss statement. It's on the balance sheet that relates to owner's draws or payments to loans, principal payments to loans, because those don't show up on the profit and loss statement.
Mm-hmm.
I need to look at what money leaves my checking account that doesn't show up on the P&L.
Mm-hmm.
And I add those together for a single month. And I divide that number by the number of days I was open. Guess what number I'm going to get?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it cost me to run my business every day that I was open last month. I can take that and I can put that into the future. I know how many days I'm going to be chairside in July. I know how many days I'm going to take off. I know how many holidays there are. I can take that information and I can say, well, what are my expenses going to be in July? Which we'll give you a 13-week cash flow projection tool, spreadsheet, to be able to say, well, what are my expenses going to be in July? I can take those numbers and figure out what my daily overhead is. So if one of my should I questions is, should I open for another day? Well, I know it's going to cost me. I know what I stand to make by opening another day. Right. So anyway, daily overhead's another one. Burn rate is simply how much money do I burn through in a single month? And that's the money that's coming out on the P&L, that net income, plus those other elements on the balance sheet there. And we'll send sample financials into the show notes too. A sample P&L, sample balance sheet, sample statement of cash flows, and kind of how they maybe tie together a little bit.
Sweet. And tell me like the idea with that. So we're going to put all this stuff, like Danny said, we'll put it in the show notes for you guys to go and like look over. So let's orient them a little bit to that. So you said there'll be some example financials. Is the idea there just like, hey, it allows me as a practice owner just to see like, okay, am I tidy? Am I organized? What I'm picturing here is like, my wife's a super organized person. Like you go into our pantry and it's like, everything has clean, nice labels and you can tell exactly where all the food is. And I'm imagining like everyone's financials, I think, are probably that way. Like some pantries you walk in, you're like, holy smokes, like I don't know where to find anything here if I'm going to cook something. And some people's financials are like quite clean and it's easy to make your way through them. So I'm assuming what you're sharing here is going to help people orient themselves to, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but kind of like,
no, you're absolutely right. Like this would be a way for you to kind of start to pre-engineer your own financials. That if they don't look like this, maybe you talk to your CFO, you talk to your CPA and say, I'd like my financials to tell me a better story. And in the ones we send in the show notes, we'll put, I'll highlight a couple things like, hey, here's the lab fees line. A general dental practice typically has this at around 5%. of their revenues.
Hmm.
Clinical supplies, right? The dental supplies line, well, that should be around 7%, right? Payroll should be around 30%, rent should be around 5%, right? So maybe put some key data pieces in there for you to be able to say, well, I wonder where mine is at.
Cool.
And then they can talk to their people who produce the financials and then, yeah, I mean, hopefully it helps them make some of those should I decisions a little bit with a little more peace of mind.
Mm-hmm. And you said you'd throw a spreadsheet or two in there as well?
Yeah, we'll throw in there's like a 13-week income projection tool, and I don't know, we'll throw a few other things in there that I feel like might be usall for you.
Okay, sweet.
And
a little financial playground.
Yeah, have some fun for nerds only. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the nice thing about working in dentistry, maybe this drew you to it, but everyone in dentistry is intelligent, highly trained from like actually getting work done perspective, but also from a scholastic perspective, so it's really fun. I enjoy working in the industry. A big reason is because of that, right? So it's a really highly skilled, highly intelligent group of folks that I love engaging with. So we do have a bunch of nerds. So if you're one of those, want to jump in, then absolutely access all the stuff in the show notes.
No, and you're absolutely right. Like, so with practice owners who are going to go in and look at that stuff, I know that not everyone will, but the ones that will so Scott Manning says you'll always max out your business ability before you max out your clinical ability. So it's the ones who are wanting to increase their business ability and apply that to their practice who are going to read that. And you're absolutely right. They're really going to dive in, and if they have more questions, then we'll answer more of those questions. And I know Dental Intel is going to continue to improve the financial tools that they're adding. Dental Intel gets better like every day. So it's just increase the tool set.
Well, Danny, if folks want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that? Do you want us to throw an email in the show notes? We'll throw the website for sure for CFO Dental Partners in there. Is your email okay to throw in there?
Yeah, that's fine. They can go to the website. They can check out my donut obsession. If you guys are big donut people, then email me with your favorite donut shop, because I'm on a hunt for the nation's best raised glazed donut.
And he's serious about that. I've been to a few events where Danny's there, and he without fail is going to take an Uber to go find what has the highest rated donuts in the area to see if it stacks up to what he's got.
I know, man, it's becoming a problem.
But he still stays in shape, so that's good. Like, kudos to Danny.
I gotta run. I don't run as much
as
he does, but I try.
Well, any parting thoughts you want to share, Danny, before we call it a day?
No, man. I hope that this is somewhat helpful for practice owners trying to seek peace of mind, and gives them a few more tools in the tool belt to help diagnose and treat their practice the same way that they do their patients.
Thank you, Danny. It's been a pleasure to have you. This has been a Growth in Dentistry podcast. Tons of thanks for Danny for joining us today. A special shout out to our marketing team for producing and doing the work behind the scenes every single week to get these episodes out to our listeners. Keep growing, everyone.